Beep, beep. What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World, and welcome to the Tech House Start to Finish. This is going to be episode 6. This series is about showing you guys my crappy ideas and then making it sound crappier, making it sound its crappiest, and then polishing it up to make it sound like a polished turd. Oh, I'm just kidding on that, guys. But today, guys, I worked about 6 hours on the song. I hit the record button, and honestly, I stopped recording after a while, and I'm just going to show you guys the changes I've done, the mastering, explaining the solutions to some problems I had in this track to finally get it to where I'm happy with it. And as a producer, you're never going to be 100% satisfied with it, but your goal should be to get it to sound as best as you can. And I feel like this is close to where I am going to be able to get it by just myself. But with that being said, guys, this is the makeover on the track from shitty turd to a little bit more of a polished one. So I'll play it from here so you guys can check it out.
After party, meet me at the after party. After party, meet me at the after party.
Can't hear the cleanness now, man.
Meet me at the after party. After party, meet me at the after party. After party. After party. After party. After party. After party.
So I'll show you guys this next part here because I did do some changes.
After party. After party.
Fast forward.
After party. After party. Meet me at the 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 after party.
Okay, so I have yet to work on this part here. I am going to fine-tune some stuff. Like that hella huge reverb from Jesus himself. But guys, as you guys can hear from the previous version to now, it sounds like Jesus Christ, like someone got a makeover and you don't even recognize them. At least you recognize the idea, like you recognize the face. But let's get straight into it, guys. So the first thing we're going to go over is mastering the Tech House track. Now, if we simplify this down, when it comes to mastering your track, there's a couple of things that you just need to know that you're going to be doing in a master most of the time. And that is going to be, first off, imaging. So that's going to be working with the stereo image. And for that, we're going to be utilizing the Ozone imager, okay? From there, you're going to be adding a bit of compression, EQ, limiting. That's it. You can add different variations to this, of course, like you can add an exciter, you can add some tape saturation, bada bing, bada boom. There's a lot of variations, but if you bring it down to the simplicity of it, you should know that you're going to have at least compression and limiting. If you need to EQ because you did a shitty job at mixing like I did, then you're going to have to EQ on the master. The master should be like the last step in quality control of getting your track to sound where it needs to be, more of a polished sound. With that being said, it's also going to be an area where you can do some corrections, but again, some corrections are just going to have to be done in the mix. So that's why certain mastering engineers will tell you, hey, fix these things, send it back, because he cannot fix the issues that are in the track. You have to fix them in the mix. So there are a couple of issues that happen with the master, and we're going to be going over every little thing. So with that being said, guys, the first thing we have is an Ozone imager. Now, ideally, what you want to do is you're going to pretty much play your song in the loudest portion, and you're going to hit learn. And as you hit learn, these bands are going to move. I'm not going to hit it just because I don't want to mess things up, but essentially that's what's going to happen. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to have our lows in the track. Now, before this change here, this track was around, as you can see here, the phase correlation, polar. Essentially, you want to see a thin line. If you're going to have a sub in stereo, you might see it widen, and you're going to see this pretty much phase correlation meter going around 0 like so. Again, it's up to preference, but with these kind of tracks, I do recommend that you have a mono response in the low end, and what that's going to look like is just a straight line. Yeah, you don't want to have that. It's just Again, this phase correlation meter, what it's telling me is when it's at +1, it's fully monocompatible. When it's around 0, and -1, you're not monocompatible at all. So a lot of times the low end, you want that to always be the driving force of a track. Anything driving always goes in mono. That's just my take on it. So that's why we have that set to 100%, -100%. Some people do opt to do it more at -60, -40. So play around with that. But again, that's going to be my tip for you. That's the first thing you want to do. From there, I like to do sort of like a ladder step. So, first step, second step, third, it kind of gradually increases. Usually you want your higher frequencies to be wider, your mids to be semi-wide, and then your mid-lows and your lows to be more centered. You're essentially making room for each frequency, and that's what this is for. So then the next one we have here is going to be the mid-low. It's okay if there's a bit of width to it. For me, 193 to 2K, the clap can have a bit of width, and that's where that wideness is coming from. As you can see, when the clap hits, there's just sort of kind of like a little, it opens up a little bit. That's how you know there's some stereo information there. Nothing wrong with that, again. But ideally, again, these frequencies to me tend to sound better and more centered. They don't have to be fully mono, but again, more centered. As we move along with the mid-high, again, it sounds fairly mono there, but again, we're adding just a bit of width because there are certain elements like the reverb, the effects that are going to be there with a bit of white information, so that's what that is for. And from there, the highs get a little bit more treatment. Okay, it's as simple as that. That's what the imager is doing, guys. Don't overcomplicate it. Just, again, this is meant to kind of separate frequencies so you can get the cleanest sound possible. From there, we're going to mess with a bit of compression. Now, what I'm going to do from here on out is I'm going to turn off each and every single one of my mastering plugins that I have right now on, and we're going to go over the compression. So
After party.
now notice when I turn on the compressor, the bass sort of like gets, you can say, boosted in volume. Let's just put it that way. The track gets a little bit more movement, and it just sounds like a little bit more like you can get into it. With it off, with it on, it's giving us that nice punch. It's giving us that nice movement. So ideally with compression, you can kind of see it as different ways. Some people like to use compressors to catch peaks. So that's just going to be a compressor with no attack, no release, and you're essentially using it to catch peaks. Something might be too loud, so you use that compressor to tame it. Here we're using the SSL, which is one of the best compressors for dance music. If you Google it, there's like a whole history behind it. Waves has a good emulation of it. Some people live by the UAD one, but you have to buy an expensive sound card for that. I just go with this one. I feel like a lot of people won't be able to tell the difference. And using this guy, pretty simple. Usually you're going to have your threshold low and your makeup low as well. And a lot of the times, if your track is already like around -6, loud, like a little bit up there, you're going to see it starts to compress already. Now, what this is telling you is just a gain reduction, because compression is volume automation. When the threshold is hit, essentially the compressor is like, no, calm down, calm down, calm down. The way it does that is defined by the attack and the release and your ratio. Now for this, I chose a ratio of 2. That just means 2 to 1. For every 2 dB that goes over the threshold, 1 dB will come out. So I like to use 2 or 4 for mastering, mastering compression. However, here, we're just going to move the threshold back to kind of grab onto it, and we're going to have that floating around -4. And then we're going to make up the volume.
After party.
And there we go. Now we can hear the compression. Notice how it kind of tames the kick, how it makes the drum sound different. It brings the bass up to the front. That's what you want to hear for when you're working with the compressor. Now, when it comes to the attack and the release settings, that's where the compressor works its magic. So essentially, the compressor is reducing volume. The attack and release define how it's doing it. Is it doing it fast? Is it letting something in through and then closing? Or is it letting a lot through and then closing? The lower the attack, the tighter the mix, but also you're going to sacrifice a lot of transient. So if I do that now
After party.
Notice how the compressor doesn't really latch on as much. Like it's not going, the needle's not moving all the way up that fast. And the reason for that is because if we have a low attack, we're getting the tip of the kick and we're pushing down on it. That's going to be essentially what's triggering it. So if we set that to around 30, then we're letting kind of like the kick pass through before we actually compress. So that's why you don't see the compressor going up that much. Here, I set it to 0.1 millisecond. 3 sounds good as well. But compression, the best way Steve Angelo, I believe, explained it, is something that you feel more than you actually hear. I mean, you can definitely hear it in the trances, but you also get that movement to it. And that's another reason why you would want to have a compressor on the master, is to add movement to your track, to get it to sound tight, to bring up certain elements, to make it sound big. You know, there's so many reasons, guys, but the biggest thing of it all, it's volume automation. It adds movement, and you can use it to kind of just get a tighter mix. In this instance, it added a lot of movement for me, so I really like it. From there, we did a bit of EQing, guys, and I did a bit of serial EQing here. Usually when you have some EQs going, they're not the greatest, so you're going to fine-tune with the EQ8, or you might use another plugin. Now, I decided to go with the solid EQ here from Native Instruments. As you know, a lot of people always like, analog gear is better, but honestly, just use what you know how to use. I just wanted to experiment a bit and use something different. Now, with the solid EQ, essentially what I did, guys, is I rolled off a bit of the low end up to 42 hertz, as G is going to be around 43, 45. So anything below that, I consider junk sub information. Now, there's going to be people that will debate me on that. Certain people do it, certain people don't. I think it's just preference. If you feel it sounds better, it sounds better. And if not, don't do it. But I usually end up doing it, and I teach my students to do it as well. From here, we're going to have first off the LF, which is the low frequencies. Here you can switch between a bell, or you can switch between like this sort of low shelf, I believe that's what it is. What I have here is at 59 hertz, I'm reducing by negative 2.7. I found I had too much low end in the track. So if I turn this off and I add it, you can see the low end is sort of brought down a bit. We're also bringing down the low mid frequencies here at a range of 200. Now you may be going, okay, cool, Sen. I mean, I know how to use an EQ, but how did you reach those numbers? Essentially, like you guys know, I've been using reference a lot to, you know, reference and get my mix to sound right. So what I like to do is I like to have reference up, and I like to have span. And I have 2 tracks that are similar to me. We have Little Fisher, You Little Beauty, and we have Rock the House. So as I switch between them and I audition the low, I'm going to pretty much here put my limiters on so you can hear what it's. You can see the frequency response here, and I want it to be exactly the same. So if I get rid of the solid EQ, I am a little louder than he is. So to me, it was just, honestly, it just made sense to do a little bit of a low frequency reduction around 59 hertz. Anything below 59 hertz got pushed down a bit because I'm using this. I'm not using the bell. From there, the low mid frequencies, again, we did the exact same thing. I solo. Yeah.
After party.
It's a little bit reducement around 200 hertz. I added it, made it sound better. Here for this guy, we are going to have a surgical or a broad EQ. So the more to the right, you're going to boost more around that, or reduce more around that frequency. To the right of that, we're going to have our high mid frequency.
After party.
And it's boosting around 1,000 hertz at 4.3 dB with a sort of surgical EQ. We can definitely go more broader.
After party.
So you can kind of hear what it does, the whole EQ there. Now we are rolling off a bit of the high end, and that's about it, guys. There's really not much to explain there. From here, we use the EQ8, as I saw that when we approach this area, we reduced around 500 hertz just to, again, add a bit of separation between the highs and the lows. I didn't want essentially a flat mix, and what that means is that this is all the way straight. So if we get rid of this,
after party.
you can see how much that actually does. So usually what I tell my students is you don't want a flat response because it's not going to bounce. It's not going to feel like that. It's just going to feel like neutral. So, you know, some monitors are great because they give you a neutral signal, and that's dope because you get that vibe and you can make it sound good there. It's going to sound good anywhere else. However, here we don't want this to sound neutral. You can see this just comes up too much. So I want to keep that down, and I want it to sound cleaner, and that reducement there helped a ton for that. From there, we're going to have two limiters, guys, and I believe in two limiters. You know, I believe that you need to have as much defenses as you can to prevent clipping. The first limiter is going to be the Fat Filter Pro because it has ISP. So that's going to help with inner sample peaking, another fancy way of saying digital clipping, the worst kind of clipping you can get. Analog clipping, bit of saturation. Digital clipping, too much. So usually what I do with the Pro, and I tell people to do, is to push it until we start to get a bit of gain reduction or attenuation. Essentially, we're just going to run it to there. So this captures the ISP or the digital clips. And from there, we're going to use the last limiter to just get it to where it needs to be in terms of loudness. Now, this last limiter is the stealth limiter from T-Rex. It's one of my favorite ones, along with the invisible limiter. There's 4 different modes, but I always tend to go with the tight. I sometimes go with the harmonics if I feel that the mix needs a little bit more excitement in there. However, the one thing I always will put is an outsling at negative 0.3. This is another sort of wall of defense against inner sample peaking. So essentially, when you're going from wave to MP3, you're going to sum up, and sometimes you're going to see some tracks that like to clip when they're MP3. For instance, if you look at the Shiva soundtrack or the Fisher one up here, you can see the Shiva sound one is clipping. The Fisher one is not. The Shiba Sound one, probably whoever mastered it didn't, again, have the last limiter out by negative 0.3 or negative 0.6, which is kind of like something a lot of mastering engineers do. I know because I went online and I read a lot of discussions about this. So that's what that is going to be there for. With that being said, guys, let's go over some of the changes that we've done. The first big change is going to be the kick. The kick was good, but it was not Fisher good. Fisher's kick is so dumpy that I needed to rework the kick in the track. It's still the same kick. However, there's one big change on it. The first one is we're going to have a solid EQ, the one we used on the master. So this is how the kick sounded like before. Now, when we add the solid EQ, okay, now essentially what's happening here, guys, is that the kick lacked a lot of frequencies, low mid frequencies. So around 200 hertz is where the dump of a kick is going to be at. If you want to, again, add dump to a kick, you feel it needs to, or you reference your track and you find your kick isn't punching through the mix like other tracks, it's a good idea maybe to try it out to where you add a bit of boost to get that kick punch through. Sort of kind of makes it like someone's pushing it to the front of the mix there. So I definitely went for a low field here increase and also a low mid field. Now, how did I come to those values? Well, what I did, guys, is pretty simple. Again, referencing. So I went to the beginning of my track. I essentially looped that. And then I went to the Fisher track and the Shiva Sound track where they just have a drum and a drums and a kick going. And again, using reference, I balanced it out as best as I could. Now, as you can see, this is fairly balanced. And what I mean by this is I'm there with Fisher. You know, I'm off by a few here and there, but you got to keep in mind that when you have different drums, you don't have the exact same drums as I say. It's very hard to expect an exact frequency response from it. So as long as you're close, that's what you want. The highs is just due to the fact that Fisher has open hats that aren't so bright. So mines are fairly bright, and I like that. So I knew my highs would be over the top there. So there's really nothing wrong there with that. can see that my clap is almost as loud as his, but his is just a little bit louder. And I didn't like the way mine sounded at that volume, so that's why I decided not to get it up there that much. But that's how I mix those drums, guys. So that's how I decided the kick needed more thump. Because if I do this, yeah, you know, the kick wasn't really standing a chance there. So the next thing I did is I actually went to Fisher's track and I sampled the kick and I got the click from it because I felt this kick needed a little bit of a top kick. You can also use the Cashmere ones, but in essence, what that did for us, again, it's kind of like it elevated the kick a bit. And now once we have, so again, guys, problem solving. Sometimes we're going to grab kicks that just don't fit our tracks. They might fit other tracks. You know, like this hit could be more for a warehouse sort of vibe. While in this kind, I needed more of a puncher kick. So again, the easy solution was just to add a top kick to that. Now the top kick, there's nothing on it because the top kick will usually not have low frequencies. So there's nothing on it, and that's going to be that for the kick. Pretty simple. The last thing I actually did is I shortened it. So what that does is I use LFO tool, guys, and I inverse it so that this is how it would have sounded like if the kick was allowed to be long. So once we shorten, it sounds a lot cleaner. A lot of these tracks, you don't need a long kick like this. So again, long kick, you can just shorten it a bit and you're good to go. Okay, with that being said, let's focus on the bass now, which is, as you guys know, what was causing me the biggest issues. So one of the things, as you guys know, was that my idea was something of, so before it was something like this. That was not the greatest idea to do. It was causing a lot of issues with the low end and the mid lows. So what I decided to do is remove that, just have this bass go doo. That fixed a lot of my issues out of the get-go. And then when I did that, that opened up the possibilities because I could actually let a little bit more of those mid lows shine more. Because before, as you guys know, we kind of reduced the mid lows because the bass was just literally like just killing. So what we did is we gave some of the mids back because now we don't have that upper high octave sound like they do in Future Bound, so it didn't cause any issues there. So we still have that cut going there, and then we have a solid EQ coming in doing nothing. I don't even know why I have it. I think it's just rolling off below 30 hertz there. You guys already know the R-Bass model that I explained before, but the new addition is going to be this EQ8 here, which is reducing on 72.3. Now, I don't know if I'm going to stay with this because it's kind of like you can go with either one, especially with this guy here. But this one, for definitely, we moved it, changed it. As I heard the bass playing, you can hear this nasty resonation. That sounds a lot more balanced. So what usually you want to do is you want to addition the frequency. That was the sound. That's what I'm saying. This one is kind of a friendly frequency. It's actually the meat of the bass. So I might choose to add it a bit more back in. We'll see what we end up doing with that, guys. But if I turn that off and play
after party.
You can see the change that it does for me there. Okay. From there, the sidechain on the bass actually changed a little bit. It's now a lot shorter. Back then it was like this, where it kind of kills the... So we can actually put it here because we made the kick essentially this. So we just do the inverse of that for our sidechain. That's it. Okay, that helped a lot there. From there, we're going to move on to the last change that we did to the bass, and that is a bit of compression. We used the MB for this. I found that the bass was just too punchy at certain times, so the MB is going to help with. So if we solo the bass, You can hear the bass, bam, 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 bam. So when we put that compressor, we're essentially calming it down there, so that the attack on it isn't so pronounced. Usually with compression, that's sort of what you want to fix. You either want to tame the attack, the t-t-t, or you want to accentuate it because maybe your sound is just too like, and you want it to be boom, boom, boom. So that's sort of reasons just to make this feel a little bit more tighter. On the top end, really, there's really nothing there. I don't know why the hell I added it, but just added it. And it gives it that nice tight vibe. So usually with the MB, guys, you're going to target frequencies that you find will give you that or you feel are too pronounced. And that's how you use the MB. I'll choose to make a tutorial on it in the future so I explain it a lot better because this is kind of like, okay, it works for you, but what about me, Sen? Ideally, you should be able to hear for it, and when you hear it, then you should be able to correct it with a bit of compression there. So that's where that compressor comes into play. With that there, guys, those were the biggest changes on the track. The next things that we've done here is the open hat actually got a boost at around 1.98. As you guys know, we did the boost around over here. But at 1.98, it sounded a little bit better to me. From there, we didn't really do much with the clap. The clap is still the same. Everything is still the same. The weird horny lead is still the same. Essentially, those were the biggest changes, guys. Now, when it comes to the mastering, that's essentially it. That's all I can say. For metering, we use WLM just to measure a loudness. You want to know how loud you are. We're using reference, again, to gather data out of other reference tracks to compare it to ours to make educated decisions. And then finally, we have span just as another source of information. But hopefully that helps. Remember, guys, keeping it simple with the master is the way to go. As you can see, this master is really not that technical, and Endless Smile and all this are just effects that are on the master to, again, progress the track and do those nice little transitions that we have. But other than that, those were the biggest changes in the track, guys, and I hope that that helps you guys out in some way or form. With that being said, I'll catch you guys next time for the Tech House Start to Finish tutorial. Hopefully, again, if you guys have any questions on any of this, just leave it in the comments and I'll make sure to answer it for this video. All your questions related to this, it might be like, what's another alternative to any of these plugins? Just leave the comment and I'll get back to you guys. But with that being said, I'll catch you guys later. Take care, and you guys have an amazing day. Keep it techie, guys, and if you want to support the channel, head over to evilsounds.com as always. Peace out.